Now, another thing we should be talking about is, of course, and we will be talking about all next year, 2023, is The Voice. This is the race-based referendum designed to divide Australians into either black or white, into either Indigenous or non-Indigenous. Take your pick. Kerry White is an elder of the Narungga people and a former nurse whose genuine connection to the everyday lives of Aboriginal people has given her a unique insight into the real issues facing their communities. Kerry, in a terrific article by Stephen Tripp in The Spectator Australia this week, talked to Kerry. Kerry is pushing back on the current narrative surrounding Aboriginal people, which has been dictated by woke activists and inner city elites, and has joined the many Aboriginal people now voicing their opposition to the race-based voice. Kerry White joins us now. Kerry, lovely to see you this morning. Thanks for coming on the show. Now, wanted to ask you, you've come out in the article in The Spectator written by Stephen Tripp saying a couple of things which I think our audience deserve to hear. One is about your distaste for words like First Nations and even Indigenous. You prefer to call yourself an Aborigine. You can explain that to us. But also you are not convinced the voice is necessarily for you. Kerry, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then address those issues? Thanks.
Well, as I said, I was a nurse. I've worked in the health industry for many, many years. I used to do the KPIs, which is Key Performance Indicators for Aboriginal Health. And also I've worked on Aboriginal Health Advisory Committees, boards, hospital boards, and various other committees in regards to health. I've also been like an advisory to the government on Aboriginal health issues, and also worked on the Closing the Gap.
Great.
So that's what
Great work. Great work. Now, can you just explain to us why, firstly, you dislike expressions like First Nation and these other expressions used to describe Aboriginal people? Tell us about that.
Well, all these terms that they use to describe Aboriginal people, like Indigenous, Indigenous actually means native to this country. So anyone born in Australia is Indigenous to this country. So that creates problems when you're talking about Indigenous voice to Parliament. Which means anyone born in Australia can actually go on that voice. So they're not truly representing people like Aboriginal people of Australia. And also the First Nations term that they use for us, that is actually Canadian, that's not Australian, and it's not who we are as a people. And the government, they come up with all these politically correct things that they keep calling us, which is actually an insult to us and to our culture. And the other issue that we have is this welcome to country that they're using everywhere around Australia. That's been taken out of context. It's an attack on our culture because it is not being used correctly.
Well, they've also got these acknowledgement to countries, which non-Indigenous people, even when you land in any city in Australia on a Qantas flight, as soon as you land, they do an acknowledgement of country. What are your feelings towards that? Do you think that helps in the reconciliation effort, or is it just corporate virtue signalling?
Well, it's just virtue signalling. And acknowledgement to country is Aboriginal welcome to country. And that was only used when Aboriginal elders welcomed Aboriginal mobs onto their land for negotiation talks. It's not welcome to country. They didn't use it every day. It was a ceremonial process. So, you know, they've taken our ceremonial process and demeaned it by, you know, throwing it out there every day in every aspect of what Australian people do. And I think that that is culturally wrong.
Sorry, James.
Yep.
Kerry, you sent me a fascinating document which was your proof of Aboriginality from 30 years ago. Explain, and we'll put that up on the screen. There it is. Explain what that was and explain why you think now it is an important issue because of what you call the ticker boxes. What are the ticker boxes?
Well, the ticker boxes are, we had to have proof of Aboriginality to be able to use any Aboriginal service. Any organisation that was providing Aboriginal services like TAFE, the doctor's surgery, whatever, we had to show proof of Aboriginality to be able to use Aboriginal services. Then they did away with that, and then suddenly we had a high rise in Aboriginal people, and that was because of the ticker boxes. You just had to tick a box and suddenly you were Aboriginal. Now, as elders, we did complain about this at the time, and basically we got told to just suck it up.
James?
So, Kerry, I want to get back to the this whole idea of the voice to Parliament here. And one of the things that I've been really concerned about, I've got a lot of concerns about it, but one of them is that it will empower an activist class who actually has no interest in true reconciliation or truly closing the gap because, of course, you know, their employment and their prestige and so on is going to come from being part of this thing that's going to really, in the end, perpetuate problems, divisions, rather than actually solve problems. I'd like you to speak to that.
Well, they don't actually solve problems because everything that the government's done, everything these activists have done, have all been for city people, you know, and most of the problems that we have are in rural and remote areas. And the governments over the years, both Liberal and Labor, all they have done is actually rip the guts out of regional and remote Australia, and our health services have gone downhill. You know, comorbidities in Aboriginal people have increased, infant mortality rates increased. You know, they haven't. None of the governments or these activists have actually improved anything for the lives of Aboriginal people in rural and remote Australia. And they certainly do not understand Aboriginal culture, and Aboriginal people out in rural and remote Australia, they still live by their culture. But also they're having to live in what we call two worlds. So you have the world of Aboriginal culture, and then they're trying to, because they want to maintain their culture, pass it down to their children, etc. And then they've got to try and survive in white society as well. So they get all those pressures on them. They have no employment. Health outcomes are pretty poor. There's no avenues to be able to train to get qualifications, to, like with drug and alcohol or any of those things, to be able to go back into their communities, work with their communities and help promote better outcomes. And the activists and that, they don't get it. They'll never understand it. They don't understand the complexities involved with Aboriginal people.
Kerry White, you do a terrific job there in South Australia. Thanks so much for speaking to us this morning on Outsiders. Keep up the great work, and it's great to hear genuine Aboriginal voices speaking out in opposition to The Voice. Thanks, Kerry White, so much for coming on the show this morning.